Hi, my name is Chasta Musenda, and I want to thank you for listening to today's message. I hope this message challenges you to know Christ, experience community, and influence culture.
And I'm standing there, I'm like, how does this work? And they said, repeat after me. I'm like, you got it. I invite you, Jesus, in my heart. I invite you in my heart. Forgive me my sins. I'm 7. I don't even know what sins I had. Well, I did have sins at 7. But I'm praying this prayer, and then amen, and everyone's cheering. And I look down. And to this day, nothing has changed, to make me powerful like these people. And I remember at 7 years old going, what happened? Like nothing happened. And my dad was gracious, and my dad explained, like, it's not physical strength, this is a spiritual strength. I'm like, I don't want spiritual strength, I want physical strength. 7 years old. Can you imagine if that theology, that experience was all that I lived on? That's it. What if that's the only thing? If my theology, if I never asked questions from that point forward, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be a Jesus follower. I wouldn't be interested in the Bible. I wouldn't be interested in faith. Your faith and my faith, wherever our faiths are at, have to ask questions. They have to grow. Your theology has to sustain the questions of your life and of the world. Now, the heart won't love what the mind doesn't believe. And if your mind says this is unbelievable and you're not addressing questions, but you got this tension to where your mind is going, I don't believe, but I'm trying to have an affection for, it's incoherent. But what we're invited into is a life that makes sense of questions and invites questions. I mean, I used to think girls had cooties, and now I have 2 kids, so apparently I'm over that, okay? But your beliefs grow. Your beliefs form. And it doesn't mean you're abandoning, it means you're maturing, okay? So when we're talking about what faith looks like, it's an interesting thing because your faith is not as strong as it's absent of doubt. I just want to be clear. Your faith is not about psychological certainty. It's not like, how do I just become more certain of this thing? How do I just pray a little bit more? It's not the way the Bible describes faith. And I think you know this to be true, but you've probably experienced it, if not you, someone you know, that there are people leaving the faith based on them saying, I have questions about, or I can't make sense of, and they've left the faith in what they should have done. I would just encourage you, wrestle a little longer, or don't stop wrestling, is the story of Scripture, that faithfulness to God is not dependent on how big of faith you have. We just heard earlier, faith is small as a mustard seed. We'll talk about what that faith is. So in my life, I've kind of been known as the doubter guy, okay, which is not a very flattering adjective. But we started the Doubters Club in Denver, Colorado, and then we have clubs all over the world. And Doubters Club is this. We bring people who don't think like each other. We train them. They come into a space. It does not ever take place at a church, not because we don't like the church, just because people who go to the Doubters Club don't like the church, probably because they've been to a church before. And so it goes to these different locations. They meet, and it's co-moderated by a Jesus follower and a non-Jesus follower. And the goal, if you're like, so what's the goal? The goal is question faith, question certainty, become friends, and find truth together. And the group votes on what they want to talk about. And I've been doing that long enough that there's really 3 ways people kind of approach, like what do I put my faith in? One would be a more Eastern way, which is like how much knowledge and divine insight can I get to escape my current reality? That might be a way that some people approach faith. Another way would be more of a secularist way that would be like, what can we predict? Let's just talk about what we can predict. Let's talk about what, and again, the scientific method is very helpful, and I'm not against science at all. I think science shows us the glory of God, but it would be like, what can we predict? And then the Christian worldview says more of what has happened. We look back and go, what has happened? And if we build our faith on what we can predict, it's going to drive you crazy. Everything from the election to your family members to your job is going to drive you crazy. If we build our faith on what's the most divine knowledge we can have, how do we become the most insightful person, how do we escape reality, it's not going to sustain. In fact, that's what I was after at 7 years old. This knowledge of how do I get strong, it's not going to sustain. It won't hold. If we build our faith on what has happened, then there's a whole different way of going about the world now. Because what has happened, that's what we anchor in. We anchor into this. When we talk about the person and work of Jesus, that's an anchor. And it tells us so much about God because the clearest picture we have of God is in Jesus. It's in Jesus. So I put it in your notes like this. We don't need more answers during storms of uncertainty. We need an anchor. Now, I'm a big fan of answers. I do like answers. I think that there are a lot of answers to questions, okay? And I think we should keep learning. I think you should keep reading. But I would argue that there is an anchor. There is something you have to be able to go back to. And whether or not someone's a Jesus follower, they will always have something they go back to. So let me tell you what I go back to. Whenever I feel doubt coming in or a life storm causing that or that causing a life storm, what I go back to, you're like, I did not come on Sunday morning to hear this simple word, but I go back to what is faith? What is faith? And Hebrews 11 tells us what faith is. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. What is faith? It's confidence. This is key because when we're talking about faith, faith is not certainty. It's not being certain about everything, okay? And there are a whole groups of people that are walking away from faith because they've been told you have to be absolutely certain, beyond a shadow of a doubt, of fill in the blank. And they say, I can't. And you know what? They're right. They can't be certain. And let me explain it like this. My wife, when we got married, if you were to ask me, are you absolutely certain that she's not gonna or you're like put her in a bad light, are you absolutely certain things are gonna work out? Like you're absolutely certain, for the rest of your life, you're absolutely certain. My answer would have to be no. And then I would ask you to leave the wedding, okay, if you're asking me that the day of my wedding. But if you're like, are you absolutely certain? No, I'm not absolutely certain. And then imagine if someone says, okay, then why would you marry her? If you're not certain, why would you marry her? Well, I'd marry her based on the confidence I have in the relationship. That makes sense? You can play that game, by the way, with anything. Are you absolutely certain? It's going to feel morbid, just follow me. Are you absolutely certain when you get in the car and you drive to lunch or home, wherever, are you absolutely certain everything's going to work out? Well, no. Well, then why would you do it? Well, because I commit in the face of uncertainty based on the confidence I have. Committing in the face of uncertainty based on confidence, that's faith. In fact, the rest of that chapter will show you people who died committed to their faith. They didn't even get to actually see the expression of God in Jesus Christ. They didn't get to see what we see. In fact, the second part of what we read was that God is invisible and made these visible attributes to point us to him so that who is unseen we can know about by what is seen. What you're getting at is confidence. Faith is confidence. When you are in life's storms, certainty about how something's going to turn out, certainty about the answer, about the questions, whether it is a deeply theological question or whether it's like highly practical, or you're just going, I don't even know what tomorrow looks like. Certainty is not the answer. You won't get certainty in life in general. Confidence is what we're looking for. And confidence in what? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So if you ever do go sailing, I have friends who sail up in the Pacific Northwest, and there's these 5 things they said every single sailor will know, And in fact, going online, these are the 5 things in storms to do. So I want to give you 5 steps to anchoring in a storm. This is a small anchor, okay? I will tell you this. This looks small. This is heavy. Okay? Obviously, the power thing didn't work on a 7. Otherwise, this wouldn't be so heavy. This is heavy. This is an anchor. There are 5 steps to anchoring in a storm. Here's one of the things that they just say, do not do in a storm. In a storm's coming in, don't just rush for the shore. Don't do it. You will shipwreck. Don't just try to get out. Don't just try to run. In fact, we don't want to run from storms when it comes to our life and our questions and our doubts. We don't want to run. We want to experience that. We want to go, okay, I need to experience this. I need an anchor in this moment. If you run, it's still there. The problem with me is I bring me with me every single day, okay? And it's still there. And I learned this early on when I tried to run from my doubts and my questions. And then there was someone who was much wiser than me that said, just sit with it. You need to wrestle with this. So here's the first step in anchoring in a storm. Well, let me read this to you real quick. Let's go to Matthew 28. Matthew verse 28, chapter 28, verse 16. This is commonly referred to as the Great Commission, but I want to point something out to you. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshiped him. And then what is those next 3 words? But some did what? But some, say it with me, doubted. Some doubted. But we're talking about disciples, right? Yeah, we're talking about the Great Commission, like the moment, right? Yeah, we're talking about all that. But some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you, and surely I am with you always. But what about the doubt? What about the doubting disciples? It was given to them as well. But some doubted. But you have like the resurrected Jesus giving you a command, yeah. But some doubted. In fact, what we would know would be the way the Bible handles that topic. Some were uncertain. Some didn't know. Some had questions. And Jesus says, but you can still go. You can still be part of the mission. This mission doesn't require certainty. It's commitment in the face of uncertainty, which, by the way, is how you live your life every single day. Now, here's what we learned from that story and from the verse we read in Hebrews. The first step in anchoring in a storm, analyze your surrounding. The text does not hide the fact that some of the disciples doubted. Analyze your surrounding, okay? I put it like this. Doubt is not a pleasant condition, but certainty is absurd. When you are in life's storms, you must be able to say, where am I? What's going on? What am I actually feeling? Like what? I can't just run from this. Whenever there's things that happen to my kids, or there's things that are going on in my marriage, or there's things happening in my city, or there's things happening in my mind, it's not about escape, another Netflix show. How do I drown it out? How do I scroll more? How do I cope? It's not any of those things. The most healthy thing you can do is go, here's my current surroundings. Here's actually what's going on. This is what they do if you're anchoring down in a storm. Analyze the surrounding. Okay, there's a storm. Yeah, there's a storm rolling in. Can you imagine being on a boat and like there's an anchor sitting on the boat and I'm leading us on some fishing trip and you go, hey, Preston, there's a big storm coming in. And I go, there's no storm. And you go, no, look at the cloud. You feel the rain? You feel that? It's called a storm. You hear that? And I'm like, no, there's no storm. That's absurd. We can't do that. Analyze your surroundings. What's going on? What's the reality? What's the reality? Things that were simple for you before feel a little bit more complex when you've lived 24 hours, okay? What's your surroundings? What's it like? You may have run into people and you meet different people and new ideas and you go, okay, this is hard for me, okay? Just be able to admit that. There's a guy that oversees a spiritual formation retreat center called Plumline, and he talks about this thing called Clumsy Ned, okay? Clumsy Ned, picture like a giraffe named Ned and a giraffe on roller skates. And he teaches this like this. And I was up in Nashville at the retreat, and he said, Clumsy Ned is like this. It's a giraffe on roller skates. This is going to feel clumsy, but this is a great way to analyze your surroundings whenever you feel doubts and questions and you're in life storms, is like this. N is name the emotion. What am I going through? What am I actually feeling right now? What is the thing going on? Because all of our emotions, all of our feelings, they have needs, they have impairments. Name it. I feel sad, I feel confused. Name that. The E is explore it. Explore it. Like, you understand, we're wired in a way that our minds, like I said, your mind, unless your mind believes it, your heart's going to have a hard time loving it. And so, explore it. What is this? I wonder why I feel this way. I wonder why I feel disappointed by God. That doesn't mean that God's disappointing. It just means we're living in this gap of sometimes my prayers don't seem to work. I wonder why I feel that. And then D, decide what you want to do with it. What do you want to do with that feeling? What do you want to do? We were driving to San Antonio. This would have been years ago. In our van. I have since got rid of our van. You'll know why in a second. But we're driving in our van, and we went to SeaWorld, and I had the kids with me. We're driving back, and it's just like everything started going wrong with the car, and I didn't want to deal with the fact the car's breaking down. Okay, we're driving from San Antonio to Springfield, Missouri. That's not a short trek. You don't Uber the rest of the way. You know what I mean? So I'm driving, and I could hear something scraping like this as I'm driving. Now, my wife said, something's wrong. I'm like, nothing's wrong. I just didn't, you just want to avoid. You just don't want to deal with what's going on. Nothing's wrong. And she's like, no, something's going on. So we pull over. I knew something's wrong. We pull over. Well, we had just gotten some things fixed on the car. Apparently, they didn't fasten everything up to the bottom like it's supposed to be. I'm not a mechanic, so this is the way you have to imagine it. And some of the plastic and the bumper was scraping on the highway. Okay. I don't know what to do. So we took off our shoelaces as a family. We all got our shoelaces, and we tied them to the engine, not to the engine, okay, but just fastened it. Fasten's the word I like to use. We just tightened it and tied it up, and I'm like, this should work. This should get us the rest of the way. And the rest of the way, we're turning down the music every now and then periodically because we're trying to be like, okay, is it scraping still? It worked, and then we get to where we're going, and then the next morning, stay in a hotel, the next morning we have a flat tire. All this goes wrong. I say all that to say, can you imagine if I just kept refusing to acknowledge we're on like a shoestring car right now, okay? If I refused, and I was like, no, we got it fixed, and I went to the conference, and I did the retreat, and I went to I did what I was supposed to do. But you're on a shoestring faith. And there's things holding it together, and you need community. And you need to voice what's going on. The storm, just analyze it, okay? Just be honest about it. Here's the second step in anchoring in a storm. Dive your anchor. Dive your anchor. Now, in storms, before the storm, actually the swell comes in and it starts to pour down, and you gotta, put your hood on and just buckle down. Before all that happens, if you have time, it's advised you swim down and you figure out, what is this foundation? What are we about to drop this anchor into? So is this going to go into we don't want this to go into coral. We want this to go into the sand, and we want this to go into what is this going to be? We got to dive our anchor. And if you can't actually, you don't have time to explore it, then you're doing everything you can to acknowledge the reality of the foundation you're about to put your anchor into. In fact, I put it in your notes like this: doubts don't ruin someone's faith, they reveal the foundation. A bad foundation ruins their faith. We're looking to see what's the foundation, what are we actually going to put our hope in the storm. And I'm telling you, Christian cliches don't work. It's a faulty anchor, or it's faulty foundation. Like things like, if God brought you to it, God will bring you through it. Now, I know you've probably said it last week, or you've had someone text that to you. I'm not mad at you for that. I'm not mad at you. Just if you read the rest of Hebrews, tell that to the people who got sawed in two, got their heads cut off, got stabbed with a spear. You see what I'm saying? Like, God brought you to it, and he will see you today, whatever. Just recognizing well-meaning cliches in the midst of a storm where doubts are very, very real. Questions you're surrounded by. Those cliches, that's not what you anchor into. What you anchor into would be the person and work of Jesus. Even when you have questions about the Bible, I've talked with a lot of people that are going, I have questions about, or they'd say, I left faith. Why'd you leave the faith? I've left the faith because science and the Bible are incompatible. And you almost know where this is going, but then they'd say, like what? And they'd say, well, Genesis 1 is just, it doesn't make sense, and there was light before there was sun and all stuff. And I'm going, well, you're not saved based on how you interpret Genesis 1, right? But if you anchor into your interpretation of this as a science book, that's a faulty foundation. If you go, okay, I have questions about the Old Testament. I got a lot of questions, which if you don't have questions when you read it, you don't have a soul. You do have questions when you read the Old Testament, okay? That doesn't determine the validity and the stability of the person and work of Jesus. I still have things I wrestle with. Doesn't mean I'm unfaithful. Again, it just means I'm human. And the person and work of Jesus is the full revelation of God. If you've ever wondered what God looks like, Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. What I put in a life storms, I can always go back to the God of the universe. Right? Universe is created, and anything that's created has to have a cause. The God of the universe revealed himself in Jesus. And that's my anchor today. So you want to dive your anchor. You want to see what your foundation is. Number 3, let out enough scope during the storm. Okay. What is scope? Scope is going to be, this will either have a rope tied to it or it'll have a chain tied to it. But scope is like slack, okay? It's like, okay, we're gonna, when we drop the anchor down, there's a storm coming in. Okay, there's all of what you're experiencing and all your questions and uncertainties, all of that's coming in, and there's gonna be fear involved, and you're gonna name that emotion, and you're gonna do this in community. All of that's coming in, and then you go, okay, all right, it's time to put my hope in something foundational, which I would say should be the person and work of Jesus, and you do that. The scope is the slack of the chain and the rope, all right? So if I were to put this into the ground like this, and my arm is the chain, and there's no slack, I actually, the storm's gonna toss me around, because now it's just dragging on the top of the floor there. I'm not actually anchored in. If you have such a rigid faith, legalistic, religious, now, I know you're like, no, that wasn't me, that was grandma. If we're not careful, we pass that on too. But you see what I'm saying? If we elevate traditions and preferences and biases above or equal to the authority of God, we got a really tight. We don't have any scope. And so when the storms come, we actually become very judgmental. And we give quick advice, quick answers. Hey, here's what you got to do, here's what you got to do, and we avoid it, and it doesn't work. When you let enough scope in, you go, I may learn something new today. Okay, there's enough scope, there's enough slack, and that slack gives the boat some wiggle room. And this is what determines if you keep a 7-year-old theology or if your theology grows with you. In fact, the next one, check your anchor alarm system. Your anchor alarm system is the radius to which you're content of swinging at. So you can actually set the system digitally to say, if we go outside of this radius, warning, warning, warning. But it's saying, but we know, because the storm's coming, we have to have some wiggle room. We have to. You're going to learn new things. I know that's scary. But you know what's even more scary? Is thinking I've learned everything right now. At this point in my life. That I learned everything I need to know about God, the Bible, the world, people. It's not just scary. I would imagine all my friendships would go away at that point. We're going to learn. We're going to grow and we're going to mature. And we're going to encounter God and how God reveals himself to us in different ways. You know, there's this scene in one of the Narnia books, I can't remember, where Lucy is looking for Aslan, and she's like, where have you been? I looked here, and he says something to the tune of, I rarely show up the same way twice, right? And C.S. Lewis trying to get across, yeah, God interacts with us. God's a person. God's alive. I mean, we don't just sing songs for peace. I mean, God's living. When we're in this storm and there is a radius to it, like we're being tossed around a little bit. We're staying up at night. We're talking to people. We have questions now. We're leaning into relationships that we're trying to be better and more empathetic and understanding. Your posture changes. Your heart changes. You grow, your faith grows. And in some ways, we grow out of simplicity, right? We grow out of these simple answers, and we just grow into this, what Pastor Stephen was with me yesterday, of just presence. Talking about something hard in life, and just there. And that's a very mature thing to do. Check your anchor alarm system. Now, I have people in my life that we call the SEAL team, okay? The SEAL team, there's a few individuals, men in my life, that if things go wrong, my wife Lisa can call the SEAL team. She has all of their numbers, and she can say, you need to call Preston, or I need you to fly down here, okay? They've agreed to that. And there's one time in my life, it was when we left Denver where we church planted. One time I went in such a depression of like, I don't want to leave here, but we feel we're being drawn here, and that she called my SEAL team and my counselor all in one day. It was a great day, okay. But my SEAL team is my alarm system. They're my alarm system. That I need people that I can be extremely vulnerable with, and so do you. So do you. Be wise who those people are. So here's some things for me that I do in my alarm system. These are boundaries. Now, the boundaries that you set for life storms are spiritual and practical. They go hand in hand. So for me, what I set my mind on determines my mindset. I know that sounds cliche, so don't anchor into that. I'm just saying meaning if I continue to set my mind on things that are outside of God, my mind, it just throws things off, just the way I'm wired. Another one is when I don't like the outcome, check the input. This would be, I'm very careful. I do want to know what's going on in the news. I do want to know those sort of things. If I just get consumed, I don't like the type of person I become. I don't like the outcome of that. I don't like the way I talk with that. So I just know that that's a boundary for me. And here's another one. If I'm ignorant of it, I'll be influenced by it. Meaning, in my role in the Doubters Club, if I try to just put my head in the sand and just avoid other ideas and ideologies and belief systems, I will be influenced by it pretty easily. And the more I've dove into the reality of the resurrection of Jesus, the great existence of God, all those things, the more I've realized this is solid. This is solid. And I've majored hopefully on the majors now and minored on the minors. But your alarm system, give yourself some grace to grow and do it in community. Do it in community. Trusted people. And number 5. The 5th thing, now you're going to be like, this is not actually how sailors do this. This is like a sermon thing, right? No, these are the 5 things sailors do. So I want to read them to you again because the 5th one does sound like I made it up, but I didn't. Number 1, analyze your surroundings. Analyze, right? What's the reality? We do life on life's terms, okay? We'll analyze your surroundings. Number 2, dive your anchor. What am I about to dive into? Number 3, let out enough scope during the storm. Hey, we're going to be okay. We're going to be tossed around a little bit, but it's okay. Set that alarm system. Okay, hey, I'm going to need help, and I'm in a season right now. I'm in a season that's really difficult for me. I'm in a season I'm asking questions I never asked before. My kid made this decision, or I encountered this. I'm in a season. I need you to be my alarm system for me. And here's the 5th one. Have anchor faith. Sailors will tell you, all right, I know this thing looks small, but when you do all that stuff and the storm's there and I'm not going to drop it on the stage. I don't actually know. It's heavy, okay? And you drop it, and it goes in, and the chain goes down, and then it stops, and there's some scope. You just have faith the anchor's going to hold you now. You have anchor faith. And what is faith? Certainty? No. Confidence. We did everything we could do. We'll be okay. We'll make it through this storm. In fact, in Hebrews, same book we read out of originally, Hebrews 6:19 says, we have this hope as an anchor for our soul, firm and secure. It enters the inner sanctuary behind the curtain where our forerunner Jesus has entered on our behalf, meaning Jesus goes before us. We have this faith. He's the anchor of our soul. When we talk about forgiveness of sins, specifically what this is getting at, Jesus goes before us in all these things. Jesus is the anchor. So I want to give you something that you could anchor into. Just one quick thought you can anchor into. In fact, I would even encourage you, when Pastor Stephen gets back up and he talks about connect cards, you can write in there something you're dealing with, and the staff get together Monday morning and pray over those cards, not in a way of like, can you believe they're asking these questions, or they're dealing with this, or that. No, this is what it is to experience that alarm system, okay? Let this church be your alarm system. So write in that connection card, hey, here's something I'm questioning. And I don't know the last time you heard in church, if you grew up in church, of like, hey, what are you questioning? Write that down. Let this be your alarm system. But I want to show you this picture. Let's show that picture of those dogs. Do we have that? All right, you see those three little cute puppies? Our dog had 2 litters. This is the last litter. Those are Cavapoos. And I know what you're thinking. Do you have any for sale? They're in the lobby. These are Cavapoos. What's crazy about this is these dogs, some of them had names before they were born, right? These dogs, if you wanted one of these dogs, the second litter, you had to put down a deposit before it was ever alive. You're like, no, I just know I'm going to want one, okay? And so we would have people that would be on a waiting list, and we'd have a deposit, and I'm like, Lord, let them live at least till 8 weeks, you know? We got to make it. They get their deposit. They already have names. They come over, and the kids are excited. They're just watching, and there's a deposit made before they're even here for those. And Jesus says, you know, you see the birds of the sky, the lilies in the pond, and how much more does God love you than what you can see, than any creature? And Scripture says that before the foundation of the world, there's a deposit made for you. That God said, I will gladly send my son for you. If you're the only person in the world, I'd do it for you. Do it for you. God could have created a world in which you didn't exist in it. He didn't want that world. He made a deposit for you, personalized that. So whatever you're going through, your questions are real, your doubts are real. Wrestle with them. They're not bad. You're not bad because you have those questions. But can you just anchor into the fact that the creator of the universe, before the foundation of the world, said, I will make a deposit for you before you're born. Knew your name before you're born. Whatever questions you have, anchor into that today, and it could change your life. And let's see everyone else as someone that God said, yeah, I want them to, and I want them, I want them, I want them. And that's just one thing you can anchor into. And if you keep living this way, dealing with your doubts like this, you'll make it. You'll make it. So I want to bow our heads real quick. Can we bow our heads together?
Thanks so much for listening to this message. If you'd like to learn more about Seven City Church, you can visit sevencitychurch.com. Or if you're in the Fort Worth area, we'd love to invite you to our Sunday service. God bless you and have a great day.